Howdy all. Welcome back to the Sanctified Podcast, the show where I dive into the lives of various saints and share their stories. Today, I'm going to explore the life of Saint Cuthbert. Cuthbert was born in 634, most likely Northumbria, England, but some sources suggest it could have been Dunbar or elsewhere in Scotland. It is also widely believed that he was born into a wealthy family, or at least adopted into a wealthy family. Well, there aren't too many details about Cuthbert's young life. There is a pretty interesting story from when he was just an 8-year-old kid. Cuthbert was always an active boy, and he would regularly engage in friendly challenges with his friends. One day, they were doing headstands for fun, as kids do, and another child came over to them and basically said that they should just grow up and stop doing immature things. And for only being 8 years old, I think he was at the prime age for doing immature activities like that, but apparently this kid didn't think so. This kid kept complaining to Cuthbert and his friends until tears started welling up in his eyes, and when the other kids noticed, they finally stopped because they could see it was really bothering this other kid a lot. Cuthbert asked why he was so adamant that they stop goofing off. The other child told him, "Oh, holy bishop and priest Cuthbert, these unseemly stunts in order to show off your athletic ability do not become you or the dignity of your office." But Cuthbert was only a kid. These words didn't make any sense to him, but it did get him thinking. As the days passed, Cuthbert continued pondering what this strange child had said. He found himself becoming more thoughtful and serious in his actions, not partaking in the childhood shenanigans that he used to. This also suggests that Cuthbert had a predetermined path to follow, one that had been chosen for him by a higher power. The event that made up his mind was a vision of a heavenly body carrying the spirit of Bishop Aidan, who would become Saint Aidan, up through the sky. In 651, Cuthbert decided to seek a monastic life. Cuthbert joined the monastery at Melrose in the Valley of Tweed, and there he devoted himself fully to his faith. His fasting and vigils were so profound that other monks looked up to Cuthbert as a true servant of God. He spent full nights in prayer and would spend days fasting, all in an effort to glean a better understanding of what it truly meant to live a life the Lord would want him to live. After a few short years, Cuthbert was asked to move to a new monastery in Ripon by Ida, who would also become a saint after they passed away. Cuthbert and Ida were actually expelled from Ripon after a little bit and sent back to Melrose in 661 because they practiced a slightly different form of Catholicism. Ripon wanted to adhere to Celtic Catholicism, but the men felt that Roman Catholicism was a better teaching of the Word of God to follow. Cuthbert was later appointed to be abbot of Melrose after Boisil, another saint, passed away. Cuthbert would lead by example, and he traveled throughout the land, spreading the word of Christianity and preaching the gospel. These journeys were known to take over a month at a time, and he was known to heal the sick and free people of the demons that bore down on them while he was traveling. In 664, Cuthbert approached Ida, and together they went to Lindisfarne, which means Holy Island. Though Lindisfarne was under Ida's jurisdiction, Cuthbert continued his practice of traveling and preaching throughout the region. Even though some of the people he visited didn't quite see eye to eye with him, he remained extremely devoted. Eventually, people tended to come around to his ways. Cuthbert was one of them. He wasn't an outsider preaching his faith. He was a friend preaching his faith. Cuthbert was known to be a very patient, gentle, and understanding person. He strived for righteousness and would never give up on anyone who sought his help and guidance, especially if they pursued redemption from their sins. He was known to weep with those who went to him for confession because of his empathy and shared desire to save everyone who wished to be saved. Though Cuthbert was successful in his travels and very adept in his preaching of the gospel, what he truly wanted was to live in solitude, where he could spend all of his time praying, fasting, and dedicating himself to his faith. He moved to a small island that became known as, well, you could probably guess, Saint Cuthbert's Isle. This was pretty close to Lindisfarne, and there he fought demons that came to attack him through prayer, and even built a cell on his island to pray in solitude. He did build a small guest house nearby too. He knew others would want to visit him for him to impart some of his wisdom, and It is believed that angels helped him build his cell and guest house because it was just too much work for one man to accomplish as quickly as Cuthbert did. He lived here for almost a decade until Archbishop Theodore elected Cuthbert to be Bishop of Hexham in 684. But Cuthbert didn't really want this position. He just wanted to pray in solitude on his island. King Egfrith and Bishop Trumwine visited Cuthbert and insisted he came back to display his profound faith. Cuthbert humored them and went with, but almost immediately he asked to switch sees with Ida, and he got to go back to Lindisfarne and back to his humble life. Even though he only served as bishop for 2 years, he left a profound mark. In that short time, he preached to the people of his diocese, cured all sorts of ailments and disease, and even cast out demons attempting to take over some of his congregation. One example of this is when a woman had an illness that left her unable to walk. Cuthbert sent her a girdle, and when she put it on, she was able to walk again. It might have been during this time, or it might have been shortly after, but Cuthbert was asked to come to Carlisle to ordain 7 deacons into priesthood. The priest, Herbert, was living nearby and was old friends with Cuthbert. So he went to see him, as old friends would do. Cuthbert told him to ask what he needed to ask because Cuthbert's time was coming to an end. But he was only in his early 50s. It seemed too soon for the devoted priest to die. Then again, this was the 7th century, so 50s was probably a full life, though living decades longer wasn't all that uncommon either. But Herbert was extremely distraught by this. But it would turn out that the 2 men died on the exact same day, which is pretty crazy to think about. Just that sheer coincidence, if it was a coincidence, is pretty interesting. Eventually, Cuthbert set aside his pastoral duties and returned to his life of solitude, with the occasional visitor. As he got weaker, though, he wasn't able to journey down his island to see visitors as well, but some would still walk up to his cell nonetheless. In his later life, I believe around this time, but I'm not 100% certain, Cuthbert revealed that he was frequently visited by angels when he prayed and was in desperate need. He believed his first time receiving help was when he was a young man and injured his knee. A stranger in white riding a horse came to him, asked to stay with him for a time, and then he instructed him to cover his knee with a wheat flour and milk paste. The stranger left shortly after, and then Cuthbert's knee healed rapidly. He didn't speak much of other visits specifically, but he mentioned that they weren't infrequent. On February 27th, 687, Cuthbert caught his final ailments. Priest Herefrith visited him, and Cuthbert gave him instructions on what to do with his burial. He requested to be buried on his island in a stone coffin, wrapped in a special cloth that would be with the coffin. This cloth was a gift from Abbess Verka, but Cuthbert lived so simply that he felt it was too fine to wear, and he wished to be buried in it instead. Herefrith left, and for the next 5 days and 5 nights, the weather was too rough to journey to the island again. Upon his return to the island, Herefrith and other monks found him sitting on the beach. He had been there for the past 5 days and 5 nights, eating only onions for nourishment. He shared with the men that he had been attacked by demons like never before those past days. The men pled with him to let them bury him in their church so he would always be nearby and they could keep an eye on any pilgrims that come to visit him. Cuthbert didn't want to be a burden after his death, though, and with the amount of pilgrims that he might get, he just felt that it would be an unnecessary burden to these men. But they didn't care. It was worth it to them. In one last act of divine healing, Cuthbert touched one of the men suffering from dysentery, and the man was instantly healed. And together, they passed the evening in prayer and gave Cuthbert communion before he would pass. Then, on March 20th, 687, Cuthbert died. Cuthbert was buried at Lindisfarne Church, and that was pretty much it for a little over a decade. Then his tomb was opened, and he was found to be incorrupt. Relics in his tomb and his body were moved a few times thereafter to keep everything safe from Viking raids going on in the area at this time. And this was around St. Olaf's time, but it was a different part of the country, so I don't think it was St. Olaf that was doing these raids. Then, 1104, on August 24th, the tomb was opened up again, and Cuthbert's body and relics, along with Saints Bed, Aidan, Boisel, Abe, Edbert, and Aethelwald, were moved into the newly opened cathedral in Durham. Later, in 1537, commissioners from King Henry VIII came to plunder the tomb and artifacts. They found Cuthbert's body still incorrupt, almost a millennium after he died, and he's still incorrupt. That's more than just coincidence. That is incredible. In 1827, the tomb was opened yet again. Man, why can't they let this poor guy rest in peace, right? And they found a skeleton that was wrapped in fine cloth. Upon examination of the bones, they appeared to belong to a man who died in his 50s, which kind of verified that they were Cuthbert's remains. It was the right age. He was wrapped in a fine cloth. It was the area or the tomb that he was said to be buried in. It's pretty much proved that it was him. To this day, Cuthbert's body and relics lay under a stone slab at the Chapel of the Nine Altars and are a popular pilgrimage site. It came to be revealed that other people witnessed various miracles that Cuthbert performed. He would pray for safe passage of vessels in storms on multiple occasions, and the storm would end, or they would find safe harbor until the storm ended. He also was seen predicting an eagle would return with food for him after it flew overhead. And guess what? It did. Lastly, and this one I find really fun, he waded into the sea one night and spent the time praising the waves. Afterwards, otters came up to him and dried him off using their bodies. Now, there are multiple other miracles that people witnessed Cuthbert perform, and these are just a small selection of them. So if you want to research any more, you're welcome to look up Saint Cuthbert's miracles and just find dozens of them. It's pretty awesome. Cuthbert's feast day is March 20th, and he's the patron saint of Northumbria, Hexham, and Newcastle. I hope you all found Cuthbert's story as interesting as I did, and I would like to thank my father for recommending that I look into this fascinating saint. What are your thoughts on Cuthbert? What's your favorite miracle that he has performed, either while he was alive or after he died? As always, I encourage conversation about this saint with those around you, and I look forward to reading everyone's thoughts in the comments. If you have a saint you'd like me to explore, you can email me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me or leave a suggestion in the comments. I invite you to support the channel in any way you care to. You can like, subscribe, share, comment, or anything you can think of. Take care, and I hope you have a wonderful day.